Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today on a Friday. We are presented by Rally House, the official team shop of the Big Ten. Your city, your house, Rally House. And look who is in the house. Dave Refson, Jerry DiNardo, and Dave Wannstedt. This will be our crew every Friday.
Yeah, where were you last week?
Yeah.
I had a better offer.
I had to work at night. You know, some of us are... Yeah.
Two different times you could have done.
You're right. You're right. If I were more dedicated, I would have been here. If I could do it all over again, I would. Catch me up on what I missed.
What were we saying before we started? Someone used the word soft.
Soft.
Yeah.
That's cotton.
I didn't say it.
Just pudding, cotton, yogurt. I've been compared to all of them. Hey, we're going to move on. We got a huge week coming up, but let's get right to the big story. Apparently, the big story is the big board, and you look at all of the games coming up this week. You see them all here in the Big Ten. It includes a number of huge, interesting games. We got Texas and Michigan, Michigan State and Maryland starting conference play. Iowa State, Iowa, Kansas, Illinois. I think is a sneaky good game, guys. Colorado, Nebraska. We got USC in prime time, but we got the big story, and that is the biggest game of the weekend. You look at the numbers, two of the all-time great programs, both in the top 5 in all-time wins, Michigan and Texas. Michigan actually first in that category, 16 national titles, 60 college football Hall of Famers between them. Amazingly, it is just their second ever meeting. And fellas, let's break this one down. I'm really excited about this game. You know, you think about it, like these games get announced, right? So this game was announced in 2014. And I can imagine we were probably on a show back then, and we were saying, clear your calendars, right? Michigan and Texas are going to play in 2014. And then it happens. It's here, and it really is exciting to get two huge brand names like this on the field together. They couldn't have anticipated this would be the year of the 12-team playoff, but it is. And so I think this is a game that has upside for both of the teams and no real downside. If you lose the game, you learn a lot about your team.
Yeah, there really is no downside. And it'll be interesting if people continue to schedule this way, right? You see USC, Lincoln Riley wants to get out of the Notre Dame game. He's got to play 9 Big Ten games. Notre Dame has to play them back-to-back with UCLA. So I think if this happens again, it'll be maybe for the same reason, Revy, that you just said. Let's put it in a place in our calendar where if we win, it's great. If we lose, we're okay. And this is a good situation for both these teams. I mean, Absolutely. Texas predicts to be better than Michigan this year. Michigan close win. Michigan beats them at the end of the year. It could be the thing to get them in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, it's funny you say, you know, both teams brand teams, both teams the old blue bloods, and how long the game was scheduled. But let's not lose sight. Last year, both these teams were playoff teams, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, currently, it's the guy was a genius, whoever scheduled it.
And there were periods in this 10 years where it would have been a pretty average game, frankly, because both of these teams have ebbed and flowed. But now we get them at a point, Michigan coming off the national championship and with aspirations of making it into the playoff again, and Texas certainly with playoff aspirations, being a playoff team a year ago. Let's break this game down a little bit. And Jerry, Michigan's defense is its strength. I don't think there's any question about that. So as you look back on the opener against Fresno State and try to get a sense for what it's going to look like with a new defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale, what stood out to you as they prepare for what is a pretty high-powered Texas attack?
Michigan's defense is their strength by personnel and by age, right? They're a veteran defense. They've got a lot of guys coming back. What jumped out at me against Fresno State is at times when Michigan was pressuring, the corners had trouble holding up against Fresno State's wide receivers. My guess is that the Texas wide receivers are going to be bigger, faster, stronger. And my guess is Sarkisian's going to call more of those type of routes. Now, you can go into a game if you're a Wink Martindale, a defensive coordinator at Michigan, and play it any way you want. You're going to win the game, right? So this doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play Texas the way they played Fresno State. I say to you, if they do, it's going to be awful interesting on the flank, Coach.
Yeah, you know, I was surprised how much Wink blitzed, almost 50% of the time. You know, I mean, that's a lot. That's, you know, every other play almost you're bringing some type of pressure. And as much as we love the mismatch, I mean, Will Johnson and those Michigan DBs, they have to show up. Texas graduated their top 3 receivers. They're all playing in the NFL. Now, Texas, they did bring in portal guys, and they're not just bringing guys in off the street. I mean, it's guys from Alabama, guys from Clemson, guys from Georgia. So, but their receiving core is going to be new. Even though Quinn's coming back at quarterback, Heisman Trophy candidate, running backs, offensive line solid. I think the one area of Michigan's defense that it's a must that they show up and play good is that secondary, because we know Sark wants to throw the ball, and with the quarterback he has, rightfully so. But that could be a real positive. I think has to be, not could be. It needs to be a positive for Michigan's defense going forward.
You know, the other side of this is, people are protecting their players during camp now. And this could have been a situation where Wink could have felt like no matter what he did defensively, they were going to win the game. And so maybe he needed reps at certain looks.
Yep.
Or maybe he wanted Texas to spend a lot of time preparing for this thing and never show it. Right. But again, if you just go purely by the defensive video of last week, they had some trouble at times matching up with the Fresno receivers.
You know, you just made me think of something too. Wink had a reputation of coming after people.
Right.
He wants to be aggressive. Okay, so we know that. But as two head coaches here, we know you can be aggressive when we're going to score 40 points a game. Okay? Okay, because if we give up one, somebody slips and falls down, they pick somebody, a lot of bad things can happen when you're blitzing. But when you look at Michigan's offense, I didn't feel it. You know, would they have one play? Wherever, the tight end had a 20-yard pass. I didn't see any big plays. Can they win? Can they be that aggressive on defense with the style of offense that they may have to play?
And the other layer of that is Sharon Moore, first-time head coach, right? And he's got he's got to make a decision. I mean, Wink, slow it down. I mean, those
yes,
are real. I mean,
exactly.
It's tough to manage a game like that. You know, if both coordinators, I always met with my coordinators Thursday and let them share with each other their problems, so that if I said something on the headset, like Bull Reese, slow down the blitz. We're struggling over here. He would obviously do it. So it'll be interesting.
Another thing on this point. I remember Jimmy Johnson. I said something about that. Miami, we're throwing the ball like crazy. I'm saying, what are we doing here? And he said, Dave, it's on me. It's kind of what Jerry's saying. He says, when I hire an offensive coordinator, I'm hiring him for one reason. You get that ball in the end zone as many times, and I don't care how. And as a defensive guy, your job is to stop them, however you think. Now, it's my job as the head coach,
manager,
which is the point that Jerry's making, I think, is to say, time out on that blitz. You know what I mean? We can't. And so Sharon, he's going to have to control this thing differently than being an offensive guy and just scoring points.
Well, let's get into the offense, because to your point, Wani, they never play longer than 21 yards. So exactly what you were saying. This was not an explosive offense. And I think it's true. Sometimes you forget what a team looked like even a year ago. Michigan was not an explosive offense either last year.
Right.
But they could get explosion plays when they needed them. They were able to stretch the field. J.J. McCarthy was pretty accurate on those deep balls. They just didn't take a ton of shots. So it's not as if this team was scoring routinely 50 points. That wasn't how they won. They won by the fact they've gone 16 straight games without allowing more than 24 points. It's the longest streak in the country. So offensively, let's not look through this with a distorted view of what last season was. That being said, this was a little uninspiring offensively. So how much of that do you think was first game? How much of that was personnel? What's going on here with the Michigan offense coming out of week one?
Well, I think it's always a little bit of all those things, right? First of all, quarterback, I thought OG was going to start. I was surprised that he didn't. And then when he didn't, I was surprised he didn't play as much. But again, maybe there's something to the fact that they knew they could beat Fresno, maybe regardless of how they played. The other quarterback,
Davis Warren,
thank you. Davis Warren, I was shocked that he started, but he did really a good job, and he was good enough to win. Now, whether they're going to play both of them as little as they did with Orgy, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, my impression, I kind of, you talked about the big plays, and the first thought that came to my mind, J.J. McCarthy, in a lot of critical situations, made plays with his feet.
Right.
And I don't know if if our man Davis can do that or not. We know Orji can. But if you were defending JJ, if I was, you got to honor the run with him. You know, and we saw a lot of plays. That's one thing. The other thing, let's think of our Big Ten right now. We didn't have USC. When it comes to mind, explosiveness. Oregon, explosiveness. Washington, explosiveness. So will scoring 20 points a game and playing defense be good enough to win you a championship today in today's Big Ten? Penn State proved that they're going to be explosive, right? And we know Ohio State will build. So, I mean, Michigan, if I'm sitting back looking at this thing saying, wow, you know what I mean? Our whole, with the additions of these new teams coming in, they're all big-time scoring point teams. So, we're going to be able to hold up and win a championship. I think it's a legitimate question.
And it brings us back to the defense. If they're not going to be explosive, don't let the other team be explosive because you might not be able to manage.
And what you're saying is blitzing as much as they did. And just for a reference, so you were saying about 50% last week. It was about 25% last year. There were 25% blitz teams.
Right.
So you're talking about twice as much. And what you're saying is maybe that's not the right strategy with this team that you have, because at least right now, you seem to be more limited offensively than you were a year ago.
Correct, unless, like Dave has explained, the defensive guy was hired to play defense, not to worry about if the offense was any good and all that stuff. And, Jim Harbaugh went through this with Don Brown. I mean, Jim's a veteran head coach. I got to tell you, these are tough positions. They have a lot to do with the morale of your staff and how you go about your everyday business. And yet, none of this could be true because they may have been trying to set Texas up. We're just going to have to wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that's fascinating, right? Because you've got, especially when you have an entirely new staff and a lot of new personnel, so much of that opener is with an eye on what's going to happen the next week. And to your guys' point, I mean, not only are our coaches not above that, I mean, it's a good strategy. It's a smart thing to do to show things in week one and have them plan a certain way, game plan a certain way, and then come at them differently in game two.
Howard and I were talking, what happens if Orji starts? I mean, that would be a curveball for Texas. Yeah. But I don't believe somebody wouldn't start someone for the next week. Yeah, that's a bridge too far.
The run game for Michigan, key. I mean, that run game, and it won't be easy. And I thought they did a good job, but graduating, 3, 4 of those offensive linemen?
No, all of them are gone.
Five,
all five,
gone.
All five are gone.
But they're good and athletic. I mean, they're
and Texas, they lose their 2 tackles, but guess who they replaced them with? A starting tackle from Alabama and somebody else. You know what I mean? So their front 7, it won't be easy. This will be a test.
2 elite defenses against the run,
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
And about 4 yards per carry just over against Fresno State. Is that going to cut it against Texas? We'll see. Got to get Donovan Edwards going. He is great in big games.
Yes, he is.
So perhaps this will be one of those games where he explodes. Another huge slate of football for you tomorrow, noon Eastern. Number 8 Penn State takes on Bowling Green, and Rutgers hosts Akron. 3:30 Michigan State collides with Maryland. Washington takes on Eastern Michigan. Then in primetime, number 2 Ohio State faces Western Michigan. It's followed by 13th ranked USC against Utah State. Go to btn.com/gamefinder for channel information in your area. Let's dive into a few of these games. Start with the Buckeyes. They do not figure to have much problem with Western Michigan. They have not lost to a MAC team since '94. And yes, Jerry, that is 1894. Yeah, so it's been a while since it's happened. So instead of focusing in on the game itself, let's focus in on what we learned in game 1 from Ohio State. Let's start with the offense. First time we've seen Chip Kelly's offense in action. Will Howard, a quarterback. What did you take from it?
Those are the 2 biggest takeaways, right? So a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator. So you go to Ohio State's practice as we do. They have all the talent in the world. I mean, how much do you run it? How much do you pass it? I think is what they're going to try to figure out, because Will is a different quarterback than they've had in recent years. But if you look at Chip Kelly, he's a great play caller. If you look at the running backs, they have 2 great running backs. If you look at the people on the flank, they have great wide receivers. So really the issue isn't obviously talent. It's the issue how Chip's going to call the game and how much they can rely on Will Howard in the pass game. I don't think they know what he can do in the pass game yet. I think they know what he can do in the run game. They know what the offensive line can do. There's no bigger question than what can Will Howard do on offense for the Michigan State season.
You know, the interesting thing, Chip Kelly, talking to quarterbacks that have played for him, going back to his Oregon days, he used to always tell them, it's not how much I know. Tell me what you're comfortable with and what you feel that you can execute the best. And then he would say, I'm going to build the rest of the game plan, the run, the play action passes, off of what you can do best and what you're most comfortable with. I think the other thing with Will Howard, watching him at Kansas State, this guy's a dual threat quarterback.
Very much
and
so.
I don't think people, you know, he's not perceived that way yet because we really haven't seen it. We're just getting into it. But I think Chip's going to have enough quarterback run in there to kind of keep people honest and create some pressures on the defense that way. And this was the arrow's up on Will. I mean, think about coming from Kansas State, Manhattan, Kansas. You ever been to Manhattan, Kansas?
I have been to Manhattan, Kansas,
okay.
yeah. Just one time.
You've been
yeah.
everywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry and I
Little
have been
Apple.
we've been to Manhattan,
Yes.
okay? And now he's in Columbus.
I've been to both Manhattans, by the way, but
You spent more time in the other one.
Spend more time in the
The
big
more
city.
prominent one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my point is now he's in Columbus and there's 100,000 people. And this is a big move for this kid just to deal with everything other than completing a pass. I think the arrow's up. He completed 60% of the passes. I think he's going to be fine. I really do.
I might push back on one thing that you said, though, Coach. I think most of the time in spread offenses, if you have a quarterback that's not a dual threat, you still want to threaten the defense, in my opinion, twice a quarter on the option to make sure that they defend the option. And that's the kind of quarterbacks that Ohio State has had recently. I think Will Howard is definitely more than a two-run quarterback each quarter. He's going to be a significant running threat.
I agree.
Whereas, you know, the throwers they've had, it's a token thing to do because if you're not responsible for the dive, the quarterback pitch, you know you can get burnt. So I think that's one of the things they're trying to figure out. But the way you describe Chip and the way he approaches quarterbacks, it's never been more appropriate than right now what he's doing with Will. It's not about me, it's about you, and they go from there.
And we haven't really seen it yet. The Chip Kelly, he's got to be sitting there in his office, right, with a book right now, seriously saying, I can't wait, you know, when we start playing games that are, you know, meaningful.
And in fairness, not a bad defense they're facing. This team was beating Wisconsin in the fourth quarter. They had 16 pressures in that game, which was in the top 5 in FBS in week 1. So there may be some guys in his face, particularly remember Donovan Jackson was out for Ohio State. We'll see how that line looks.
And Ohio State didn't get off to a fast start.
No,
at
they
all.
did not.
I mean,
really slow.
You could call it slow. Yeah. Not fast.
You were leaning towards not fast.
I was trying to be polite.
You were comfortable with me
I-
saying slow.
Yeah. As long as people know I was quoting you.
Some big news this week out of USC involving 2 of its 8 Heisman Trophy winners. The school's retiring Caleb Williams, number 13. The new Bears QB won the Heisman, of course, 2 years ago. That jersey will be displayed with the other winners in the Coliseum end zone. They're also redisplaying Reggie Bush's number 5. Bush's Heisman reinstated in April. Was previously vacated due to NCAA sanctions. Their jersey was removed from display in 2010, so it will now be back, and they will be in the shadow of those jerseys. Their first home game against Utah State, your old stomping grounds at the Coliseum. Wani, you were an assistant coach there back in the day. USC may have been the most impressive win for a Big Ten team in week 1. You can maybe make an argument Penn State going on the road. I know you were really impressed with them as well in Morgantown. But, man, USC was good. They are dynamic. So what did we learn about the Trojans in week 1?
Well, it changed my conversation about the Big Ten because all I've been telling everybody is Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon. You know what I mean? And then we bring USC in. I think after that performance against LSU, you know, with a new quarterback who we talked about, new receivers, he had to do some retooling on offense, and to go out there, and I loved how Lincoln Riley, I'll tell you what, he did that was a tense game. We all saw it, a physical game. And he kept his cool, and his players were reacting to him. And Winston, you know, the quarterback, I mean, everybody was steady. And when you looked at the sheet, you know, 27 passes, you know, 24 runs. They played a balanced game for them. So just speaking offensively, you know, without getting into USC's defense, it was impressive. It truly was against a really good team.
Yeah, I thought both Coach Stanton Lynn and Lincoln Riley called unbelievable games. Lincoln Riley throwing the ball from his being backed up and then running the ball when they never expected to run was genius.
For the game-winning play.
Right, and
Right.
Denton Lynn started out in quarter coverages, and then he mixed up a bunch of different coverages. So I thought he was outstanding. My biggest concern, I'm not sure I agree with you with the balance, they only rushed for 69 yards. Now, nowadays, do you have to be a running team? You probably don't, but there's got to be situations where you have to be able to run it. So I would say that coming off of it, if you wanted to work on where your weakness was, it's running the ball. Now, the number of runs you call and the way Lincoln Riley calls a game may be enough. The total yards in the Lincoln Riley offense, when you're defending them, may have nothing to do with it. It's how many times he throws it. So he throws it to run it. So we have to wait and see how that plays out. But
we got to talk about that defense. You mentioned it there. I mean, this LSU team was the highest scoring team in the country last year. And USC against ranked people, they've been averaging the last 2 years 40 points a game. They gave up 20. Here's the challenge. Here's the challenge to me. You can't play great defense unless you are emotionally all in. They were emotionally all in. That was fantastic plan and execution by the players. Now you got to do that the next week,
Well, I was watching an interview with one of the USC players. I can't remember who it was. It was a defensive player, and the question was, what's the difference with this year's defense? He says, the coaches. I mean, the morale for the offense now to see a defense. I mean, that if you're not with each other, it's hard to win a championship. And this is the best thing that could have happened to USC's offense, to see that defense help win the LSU game.
And I've said this a couple of times. I mean, Dan Lynn deserves all the praise in the world. He did an incredible job at UCLA, comes across town. But the commitment to defense, you hire Matt Entz as your linebackers coach. I mean, this guy won national championships as a head coach at North Dakota State, and he is your linebacker coach. I mean, that shows how committed you are to defense.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about Lynn is he was a player the first year of the network, and now he's a defensive coordinator at SC.
I feel like it may have been a few years into the network, actually.
So he's getting old. I'm just worried about his age.
He's getting old, Yeah, the rest of us have held steady.
Another feather for Penn State, ex-Penn Stater.
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, you're really trying this. You're really trying to do this Penn State.
James.
Back on Big Ten today, Colorado, Nebraska tomorrow will not be devoid of star power. Huskers Dylan Raiola, great debut. Texas transfer Isaiah Nair, his favorite target. The Buffs boast two of the most exciting players in the country. Shedeur Sanders threw for 445 yards in the opener, most of any FBS QB. And Travis Hunter, 3 TD catches. He played 124 of the 126 offensive and defensive snaps in the game. And he also played 7 on special teams. Just for good measure. It's pretty remarkable. He is a fabulous player. You know this rivalry from the other side. So I'm interested in your perspective. It's just one game, right? And yet, for where I sit, it feels like maybe there's heightened importance for Nebraska fans, partly because of what happened last year, but partly because of the parallels. This is a Colorado program they owned through the years.
Right.
You've got second-year head coaches at both places. And Colorado, even though the win-loss record wasn't great last year, they did steal some of the spotlight and they beat the Huskers. So is this game different because it's against Colorado?
I think so. I do think there might be a different intensity on the Colorado side than there is on the Nebraska side for this reason, okay? So the way this rivalry started, I'll do this very quickly. In 1982, Bill McCartney, Bo Schembecker, assistant at Michigan, came to Colorado. I went with him. And Colorado didn't have a rivalry. They weren't playing Colorado State every year, so Bill wanted to pick out a rivalry. I was hoping it was going to be Kansas State, who was struggling at the same time, but he picked Nebraska.
Kansas was also available.
Kansas
We were 4 wins.
And Nebraska's got Oklahoma, right? Nebraska has Oklahoma. I mean, Nebraska's got their own rivals,
right?
And they want nothing to do with a fly on their shoulder. And so the more they ignored Bill, the more intense he made the rivalry. So I think there's some of that still lingers because Colorado really now, who is Colorado's rivalry? They're in the same boat they were in 1982. But there's enough people there that want this to continue to be a rivalry. So I do think it's a rivalry. I think it's more intense on the Colorado side than it is on the Nebraska side. Now, Nebraska's lost their rivalries too, right? They've lost Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, so maybe I'm wrong there as well. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was at Oklahoma State during that same era, so I concur with that. We like to think that OU was our rivalry, and they weren't.
Right.
We were a fly on their
So the
shoulder.
same way the hammer and the nail are a rival, right? Yeah.
But you know what? When I watched this Nebraska game, the thing that kept coming to my mind is they didn't do a lot of philosophy change. You know, Matt Roll is Matt Roll, going back to his Temple days when I was at Pitt and we would do clinics together. But how about 31 turnovers? Lead the country last year. Just think if they don't turn the ball over just half as much, it might have been worth 3 or 4 more wins for him. So now he's got a better team. He's got his staff together, and they come out and run for 200 and pass for 200 last week. Very balanced with a freshman quarterback. Defense played like they always had. So I think they're going to be a very good football team. I really do.
You go defense and you go Raiola, they're a good team. And you know, Matt Rule has said this, I believe. A bowl game is a minimum goal. And a lot of times coaches don't like to say things like that. I appreciate him saying that because I think he's right on. I mean, there's no reason that this team doesn't have enough good players to win 6 games when you look at the schedule.
When the two of you were in the Big 8, if someone would have told you that in 2024 the power conference team with the longest bowl drought would be Nebraska, I mean, you would have said you got to have your head examined, right? I mean, it was so unfathomable with how fabulous they were as a program. So, yeah, you can't shy away from making a bowl game at Nebraska. Absolutely.
Right. And I always say this, and Nebraska's tested me. If you've had greatness in your past, you could have it in your future. I really believe that.
Right.
You know, like I think Southern Cal could be a great team. Not that they're
Army.
Army.
I mean, I'm just saying there are a lot of places that had greatness in their past, but I understand what you're saying.
Wishbone, yeah. I got to make one comment on Colorado.
Your whole train of thought was lost.
Army's in a different class.
They had both Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. I mean, what more could you possibly
Anyway, my point was Nebraska's testing my theory until you threw Army out. Now I've got to say Nebraska and Army. Yes.
One point, one football point, please. Okay?
Please.
The one thing that will be interesting to watch is the speed of Colorado's defense. With a freshman quarterback, I mean, these guys can get it. They can run. They got good athletes. I don't know about the scheme or anything like that.
Yeah, but they don't know about the scheme either. I mean, I would just say, if there's one side of the ball.
I've coached a lot of guys that didn't need to know about the scheme, but they were great athletes. You know what I mean? So, I mean, my point is that these guys are going to be flying around at a different speed, I think. I'll be real curious to see how they react.
They'll have the best players on the field, right? I mean, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, unbelievable players. So that'll be a fascinating game. Iowa and Iowa State, the Hawks had their most total yards in 5 years in the opener, nearly 500. Yes. So, Wani, I'm asking you, are you buying in? Someone at halftime of the game said that Iowa was the same old story, so I'll let him have a chance to rescind that.
Not exactly what I said, but go on.
Publicly.
Let me gather my thoughts. No, go on.
Let me just say that.
Thank you.
Are you buying it? Are you buying Iowa's offense?
Okay. They don't have to score this many points every week to win. With the defense they have, and it looks like the running game is back in sync a little bit. I'll tell you what, Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator, the guy I'm happiest for is Cade McNamara. I mean, this kid, I remember talking to Kirk Ferentz before last season, and he made the comment that because of having Cade, that he really felt like they could make a step. You know, we forget what this kid accomplished, and just for him to come out there, and I know he didn't play fantastic, he got better, but just to see him out there making plays, his leadership, I think it brings a sense of confidence to this team, and so I'm buying them. Yes, I do think that this offense is going to be better and more productive. And Phil Parker and these defensive guys aren't backing away. We know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I don't make any decision that this is permanent or temporary. What I said at halftime is not only was Cade struggling, but this is a team, regardless of Cade, they should have been ahead. Kirk Ferentz wasn't in the house. You know, are they going to make a change of quarterback? And then he came out and he played very well in the second half. Is it more the first half or the second half of Cade? I think we're all pulling, obviously, that it's the second, but it's too soon to know. They're still going to win with defense, special teams, and then hopefully better offensive performance than they've had in the past. But the offense didn't look all that different, right? I mean, it had some similarities to what they've done in the past just because that's their personnel.
Yeah.
But, you know, Cade, it's a tough injury. We saw him at practice and camp. I mean, he was still fighting through that injury. So hopefully it's going to be the second half Cade that we're going to see the rest of the year.
The other thing that changed at halftime, too, which you could not have anticipated, was Caleb Johnson came in. He was suspended and obviously was
Came alive, yeah.
phenomenal in the second half. And Iowa State's banged up at linebacker, guys. So this is a perennially strong defense.
And the receivers are part of the game, too, now. You
Right.
know, receivers making some plays for Iowa, you know, which I thought was a real positive.
This will probably be a tight game if history's to be our guide. 4 of the last 5 decided by 7 points or fewer. Again, an intense rivalry there in the state of Iowa. Maryland and Michigan State tomorrow in College Park, both winners in week 1, but that's where the similarities end. Maryland was overwhelming on offense against UConn. Billy Edwards really accurate, error-free, better than 300 passing yards. Michigan State struggled against FAU. Aiden Childs completed less than 42%, turned it over twice in his first career start. But again, got a win. Let's begin with the Terps here, Jerry. They lost their career leader in passing yards, Elia Tagovailoa, and yet you would not have known it. I mean, this offense did not skip a beat.
I think this is the best offense that I've watched them on tape for a few years. I mean, their offensive line was aggressive off the line of scrimmage. Billy Edwards was great. You know, it's interesting, when Maryland came into the conference, it changed their sports programs, it changed their universities. And then last year, they were 5-0, and people kept saying, when are they going to beat Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State? And I think that became a tremendous distraction, and I think the season ended because of that. Now, I think they play Penn State. I don't think they play the other ones. I know they have some tough games, but that has taken the weight off of their shoulders, where they're not constantly hearing, when are you going to chase those 3? They can just play one game after another. And when I watch their offense on tape, for a first game, I thought their execution was great. They were very physical, and this Edwards guy, he was playing with all kinds of confidence. They're going to have a better offense this year without Leah. You know, and it's not Leah's fault. I mean, it was always frantic with him in there. You never knew what was going to happen offensively. Now they're so much more methodical the way they're approaching their offense. I was very impressed.
Yeah, but have big shoes to fill. I mean, you know, Leah's setting all these records, and this guy's going to take his place. 4 passes over 25 yards, made a lot of plays. The position on offense that jumped at me, you mentioned it, the offensive line. They got 3 new starters inside there. And those guys, because that position, you know, takes time before they all start the communication and working together and everything that goes along with it. And boy, the line coach, I mean, hats off to him. He did a fantastic job. Really did on offense.
And they'll get a good test here against Michigan State. And conference play has been a bugaboo for Maryland. You talk about when you can beat Ohio State and Penn State, Michigan, and it's true. And I get what you're saying. 14-27 under Mike Loxley in Big Ten play. So that's the next step. It was beating those teams. Part of it was the deck was stacked against him because he had to play those teams, those 3 of his games, every single year. Now you got Michigan State, a team that was also in their division in the East, a team that's in transition. Yep. Defense looked really good. Offense was a little shaky. What did you take from Jonathan Smith's debut?
Just what you said off the top, River. I mean, if I just read these stats, my team had 7 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, 2 takeaways, and a safety. Oh, how much did we win by? Well, they didn't. Why didn't they? How about penalties? How about 7 15-yard penalties, 12 penalties total, 140 or 50 yards, whatever it was. And it makes you wonder, because you know that's not the DNA of a Jonathan Smith football team. The only thing I can come to we talked about, 60 new players and how many portal players they brought. And some of the really good players, they had their 2 defensive tackles. Even they left, go to Colorado and Oregon. So a total transition on their team. Does that carry over onto the field of guys just not really understanding the systems yet, buying into the systems yet? They're transfer portal guys. They've done it a different way. But something was off, and it's tough to win games, when you have 12 penalties. But it's a shame because your defense played good enough to win.
Well, they did win. I mean, figured out a way to beat FAU, but barely, to your point, not to the margin that people may have expected, Coach.
Right, so I went to Michigan State. I didn't go to Maryland camp, as you know. I think Michigan State's further away from where they want their roster to be than Mike Loxley is at Maryland. Watching Maryland on tape, they looked more athletic and deeper than the Michigan State team. But after the top 5 teams, after visiting all the teams I visited and talking to you about the ones I didn't, after those 5, I think it's going to come down to quarterback play because I think there's a lot of teams after the top 5 teams in this conference that have close to the same personnel, what I call matchup games. And this is a matchup game. So it basically comes down to quarterback play and coaching. That's what matchup games come down to, in my opinion. And this is one of those games, but I think Maryland's got a little bit more talent, a little further along.
Oregon-Idaho did not seem like a matchup game, and yet, oddly, it was incredibly competitive. In fact, Wani, I don't know if you know this, a great little nugget here. But the last time that Oregon played a non-conference home game and scored 24 or fewer points, do you know who was the coach on the opposing sideline?
Wow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, me. Yeah.
John Robinson. Oh, no. Oh, Jerry DiNardo.
Jerry DiNardo. 2004, Indiana went into Autzen Stadium and knocked off the Ducks, held them to 24 points. I don't think people expected that with this Oregon team. They had a lot of yards, but it was kind of empty yards, and it felt, went for it on 4th down, weren't able to convert. Do you read a lot into what happened against the Vandals, or do you think this is – you were at practice. I mean, how did this compare to what you saw at practice?
Okay, so every year we go to all camps and we say Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan have better players than everybody else. I say Oregon is in that group. I was totally impressed with their personnel at the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to be a fantastic team. I also, part of my life, have been around young people. And this is a tough thing to manage, right? All these guys these guys are hearing how good they are. There's still, that's an old-fashioned thought maybe, but it's still true. People constantly tell you how good you are. You're playing the team that you're supposed to beat, and you don't play very well. I haven't been around Dan Lanning a lot, but I've been around him enough to know they're going to win big tomorrow. Big. He will get that team back. He will challenge that team. We won't know what he has said to the team because he won't tell us, but I would love to know. They're going to bounce back.
Boise State's pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
Jerry, that offensive line, what'd they give up? 5 sacks
I
last
understand.
year, and they gave up 3. Come on. I mean, now, the one thing that that jumped at me sitting back watching this game, I'm saying, because when they opened up the season all last year, it seemed like fireworks were going off every play.
Yeah.
Whoever touched the ball, you jump out of your seat because he's probably going to score. That was missing, guys. They did not have big plays in this game. And that's just athletics. They have the talent. So where's your minds at? I mean,
that's the issue.
Yeah, that's this week. They'll be in full pads this week practicing. I promise you that.
I'm with you guys. I think they're going to be way, way better than they were. They didn't have a single play over 25 yards. They had 54 of them.
There you go.
Last year. Boise State's got a pretty good running back. He had a Howard Griffith-like performance. Ashton Jenney, 6 touchdowns.
6 touchdowns
against Georgia Southern. Now, they did give up 45 points to Georgia Southern. And I don't know a whole lot about Georgia Southern, but I'd say Oregon's offense, if you give up 45 to Georgia Southern.
I think Oregon's going to have a big day.
Yeah, I do too. I'm with you.
If we can just convince Wani.
I've got to see it.
I'm with you.
Hey, you got Penn State mad at you. Don't get Oregon mad at you.
Penn State's ahead of them. And want to see my listing? I got them right up there, James.
Tremendous. Don't miss a Friday night football special when the Hoosiers take on Western Illinois. Excitement kicks off at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Pre-game coverage starting at 6:30 Eastern. Now, Wani, full disclosure here.
Go ahead.
Western Illinois has not won a game since 2021. They have lost 25 straight games. So this is not figured to be a great test for Indiana. If it is, I think there are problems, but I don't think any of us believes that it will be. That being said, even though I don't think you're going to be able to judge a whole lot on tonight, I know you're really impressed early on with Kurt Cignetti.
Well, I go back to with his father recruited me, and he's in the Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame.
Are those two correlated?
Yeah, I helped a little bit. I helped a little bit. No, I did not go to. It was actually for West Virginia.
West Virginia, right?
I didn't go there. I went to Pitt, which we know.
But he's clearly a shrewd judge of talent.
And his offensive coordinator played for me at Pitt, Mike Shanahan, his quarterback coach down there. Tino was my quarterback at Pitt. So I'm pretty close to the situation. And what he did is, he's an old school foundational guy. I mean, play hard, nothing fancy, try to run the ball. If you let him run the ball, he'll run the ball 50 times. And I think, when you see the results of this thing, his quarterback 66% completion ratio, he's not doing anything bizarre. He's throwing high percentage passes. and they played hard on defense. I just think it was a great start for him. You know, and I know they got a long way to go before they catch Jerry down there, but it was a good start.
I'll say this, you know, Google me and the basketball game and all that. You know, it was fun. It was interesting. You turn that film on. I mean, they are playing hard.
Yes.
They are being coached as hard as anybody in the country. Their offense is very efficient, very creative. I was totally impressed. Now, I haven't gotten into their defense yet, but I tell you what, he can say whatever he wants. That man can coach. And the proof is on the video. Those guys played really hard and really well on offense.
I mean, you don't go 52-9 at a place or whatever
By
it was at
accident.
JMU, right? Like
Right.
you know what you're doing, right? And think about at JMU. I mean, they moved up from FCS to FBS while he was there, and they not only did they not skip a beat, they were fabulous.
And to your point about their opponent, who has not had a lot of success lately, right? You know, he's going to go back to his Nick Saban years, right? And he's going to say, doesn't matter who it is, this is about us, this is about them, and all that. So if they don't play well, he'll be on them pretty hard because he's not going to take an ugly win. He's not going to, in my opinion, I don't know him that well, just interacted with him a little bit, but I think I know his mindset. An ugly win will not be good enough for him.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, hard not to be excited. I thought they played great on defense, too. Held FIU to 182 yards. Northwestern plays tonight at home against Duke. That figures to be a much closer game than Indiana, Western Illinois. Wildcats were not great offensively. They did beat Miami of Ohio, and I don't think you can in any way sell short beating Miami of Ohio. That's a team that won the MAC last year, that might very well win the MAC this year. But offense a little shaky. Zach Lujan's debut. You're still all in, though, on this quarterback situation and on the offense.
Yeah, I'm all in on Mike Wright and the offense. It's certainly, I think he's the better quarterback that they've had, and I think their scheme is better. Interested, David Braun said that last year's game was on him with the Duke loss, and I found that interesting. So David Braun, who my guess is can be pretty motivated himself, will have this team really ready, because when you say it was my bad, as they say, I don't say it, they say it as my bad.
The kids say it,
you'll get your team going. Mike Wright, I hope, continues to progress.
Yeah, he tied my record. 6 years, 6 different quarterbacks. That's what I had at the Bears.
Those aren't all on David
All kinds
Braun.
of brackets we're breaking today.
Wait, let me. You know what? I was impressed with the defense, because I wasn't sure. You know, last year obviously David Braun called the defense as the head coach. This year he passes it on, defensive coordinator, and it seemed like they didn't miss a beat. I mean, they did a fantastic job, and when they needed it to win the game at the end, they made plays, and that tells you that the kids were in tune to what things that they were anticipating Ohio doing, and that they were coached and they were coachable. So I think defensively too, it was a nice move, nice promotion, and the kids are responding.
And in an unusual chain of events, this is a real home field advantage.
Yeah.
This new stadium and what they're doing. Yeah. It really is.
No, it's cool.
It's totally cool.
It's really, really neat.
I do have a complaint about it, though.
Okay, why are you addressing it to me?
Yeah. Because you're in a lab. The sideline video. Have you watched the video?
No.
The angle's no good.
The angle's no. So what would you suggest they erect a massive tower?
No, but one of those something. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I want some height to my sideline video. The end zone video is actually quite good.
Okay. Yeah. All right, well, to see, we can maybe
pass it on to
I know some people who know some people.
You got the money. Yeah, you got the money.
They're running up the flagpole and see. You're right. Defense did play well. Tim McGargle's a guy who, you know, I know there was some talk of promoting him to defensive coordinator when Mike Hankwitz retired. Obviously, in hindsight, given what happened with the defense, it certainly wouldn't have been a bad idea. Right. But this is a guy who has waited his turn, who has had a great career as a player there, and was itching to get this opportunity. I think it's pretty cool they got it.
Right, and he seems to me like he's had strong mentors, but he's his own guy, and he's going to make that defense his own. He's an alum. I mean, it's just it's a perfect marriage for him to continue.
Good win for him.
This is a really tough game tonight. Duke has absolutely owned Northwestern in recent years. Other than Notre Dame, this is the non-conference team Northwestern has played the most through the years. Duke's won 5 straight in the series, and now you got Manny Diaz. I mean, they had 8 sacks and 16 tackles for loss
You know what's
in their
coming,
opener.
right? At least they know from the film what's coming. You know,
Yeah.
from a schematic standpoint, what they got to protect.
Is Manny still wearing cleats? Yeah, he's a head coach again.
I don't know.
We should
That
have-
is a great question. We'll
Hey,
have to-
that's what I'm here for.
Well,
You're
you know,
supposed to have the
Where
great
do you work
questions.
cleats
on.
at?
It'll be
Miami?
interesting to-
Miami?
No, but he was coaching at Penn State,
Yeah,
your
he
favorite
wore
school. He was
cleats.
wearing cleats
Yeah, yeah.
as a coach.
If they had better angle on the camera, you might be able to pick that up. Hey, speaking of Manny Diaz, did you have something you wanted to say about Penn State? I mean, we got 30 seconds left in the
Coach,
show.
he did a fantastic
No,
job.
not Manny. I'm talking about Penn State.
What? That's it? You just get yourself in more trouble.
I told you that was my most impressive game of last weekend.
That's
What
all
about
I was
you? What
getting
about
at.
USC?
That's all I
USC.
was getting at.
More than USC.
More than USC,
Wow.
Coach. More
Penn
than
State,
USC.
most impressive
You
team.
are trying to get out of trouble.
I've been to Morgantown. That's not an easy place
No,
to
it's
play.
not.